Let's get you started on that conversation now, and we are talking about children and their rights provided for in the Constitution of Kenya and international law. So we ask ourselves this morning, what has been the progress that has been made in Kenya towards the realization, the full realization, of course, of children's rights in Kenya. Remember, tomorrow is the International Day of the African Child. And this morning, to help us, of course, dissect this conversation, I'm joined in studio by Lois Anzigali. She's the Sub-County Children's Officer at the Department of Children's Services in Kasarani Sub-County, Nairobi. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning.
All right, and joining us virtually this morning is Lillian Dodzo. She is the National Director for World Vision Kenya. Good morning, Lillian. Welcome to the show. Right. Also joining us virtually this morning is Harriet Osimbo. She's the Director of Program Implementation and Quality at Plan International, of course, which is also yet another international organization which involves itself in, of course, advancing the protection of children's rights. So maybe we should start here. And I'd like to start with Lillian. For anyone who is wondering, because tomorrow is the day of the International Day of the African Child, and it's 30 years since this day was set aside. Maybe to start us off, we can just give a brief of what this day is all about and what it means to the children of Kenya and the children of Africa.
Thank you so much for having me, and good morning to the viewers. I think most of you may recall that in 1991, the Assembly of Heads of State and Government of the then Organization of Africa Union, which was known as OAU, what we know as AU today, instituted the Day of the African Child. And this was done in memory of the 16th June 1976 student uprising in Soweto, South Africa. At that time, students marched in protest against the poor quality of education they were receiving. You remember that was during the apartheid era. So they demanded to be taught in their indigenous languages. So as they marched on the 16th of June, some of them were shot dead. So that's why on the 16th of June every year, the world celebrates the Day of the African Child, which serves really to commemorate these children and the brave action that they took in their own hands to defend their own rights. So this Day of the African Child therefore celebrates the children of Africa, and it calls for serious introspection as well as commitment towards addressing the numerous challenges facing children across the entire continent. So this celebration that we are talking about tomorrow really is a build-up to the realization of the rights of children from the family level, from the community level, and up to national and international level. So it's important for children in Kenya to actually identify themselves with that day, because it really was a brave act by students fighting for their right to good education.
Lillian, you've mentioned something very critical, which is the progress, meaning this is not something we can achieve instantly. It's something that takes time, and we have to sustain the momentum. So maybe the question that anyone would want to know right now, 30 years after, of course, this thing was set aside by then the Organization of African Union, which later became the African Union, have we made progress as Kenya?
Yes, in Kenya, we have made progress. If you look at the strategic intents of various ministries, departments, and agencies across the country that have responsibility for children's matters in Kenya, they really have incorporated these rights of the child in their planning, in their budgeting, implementation, as well as reporting. Of course, a lot more needs to be done, but there is evidence of increased budget allocation by the government of Kenya on specific programs and sub-programs whose implementation has a direct benefit to children in Kenya. And I must specifically mention education department as well as the health sectors. There you can see some marked improvement. Can we do better? Of course we can. We still have some gaps that exist, but I believe that good effort has been made in ensuring that the aspirations in Africa Agenda 2040 for children are incorporated in planning as well as in budgeting.
Okay. And I'll come back to the issue of budgeting in a short while, but let me just bring in Lois here. You interact with these children every day. And if you look at maybe 10 years ago, the challenges that children used to face 10 years ago, do you think we have made progress in protecting Kenyan children?
Thank you. Yes, I would say we have made progress. 10 years ago is when I joined the Department of Children's Services. And we used to have what we call the Kenya Children's Assembly, which has is part of what is there to be able to bring the children out, to be able to speak for themselves and child participation. But what I can say now is that when we look at child participation right now and the way it was back then when I joined the department, that is 10 years ago, there's a lot of improvement in terms of how children are able to speak up for themselves. The other day we had the launch of DAC, and we were able to see how, for example, the children representative was able to, the guest was able to articulate issues clearly than I would not have imagined such in 10 years ago. Yes.
And definitely there is some progress there, and I agree, at least from where I sit, the issues of, is it children assemblies and all that, in just trying to make sure that children are actively participating in decisions that, you know, affect them. But the problem there is sometimes we fear, there's always a gap between participation and meaningful participation. That is, do we really take advantage or really get to look at what these kids are proposing when we make policies? And maybe as you prepare to answer that question, let me just bring in Harriet from Plan International. Yeah, Harriet, the fear sometimes, the challenge sometimes is we make really good progress on the policy side. So if you look at our Kenyan laws, very well, of course, put aside or put down to make sure that we protect our children. And there's also international law, which of course Kenya has aligned itself to. But when it comes to the ground, is you realize there's a gap between what has been provided for in the Constitution and the situation on the ground. Harriet, please unmute. Yes.
You're right, Victor. There is so much that has actually progressed, and we are glad that that has happened. But as you all say, the disconnect is there. And that's why we are very expectant that much more will be done to ensure that children genuinely participate, and meaningfully so that their issues are able to, to reach and inform even policy decision making. And we are saying this because, yes, we have the Kenya Children Assembly. We are just anticipating that more will be done to allow the grassroots voices to actually reach that level where the issues that children raise on the ground reach, of course, the structures that exist and are able to be reflected in the policies that are developed. So okay. We are looking forward to that happening more and more as we look to improve children participation.
And definitely Lillian has mentioned that there has been some progress, especially on the education and health sectors, which the government has done well. But maybe from where you sit, where are these areas that we have excelled and where are the gaps?
Okay. Maybe to mention, the progress that has been made, of course, touches also on children. And I will say the social protection policy that exists definitely impacts directly on children, the orphans and vulnerable children. We are also seeing child participation guidelines that now are in place. And this one helps us, to just ensure that the guidelines really guide how children will participate and how their issues will be channeled through the structure that exists. We are also celebrating that there is a lot of investment and a commitment actually from the government to see improved data capturing that informs decision making. And Plan, for instance, in the Joint Forces Alliance is actually working towards ensuring that we are embracing harnessing technology to ensure that children are protected more. So those are among the things that are actually making it more and more easy for child protection to be realized in Kenya today. However, as you well say, there are still opportunities to ensure that this happens, and we're just really looking forward to engaging more on the platforms that exist. For instance, maybe to mention, we now have the children bill that is on the table now, and given that the Children Act of 2001 as you know, looking at that time, it's quite a vast time. We are looking forward to having this children's bill tabled in Parliament, and looking forward to have the very specific things that impact on children's life change. One of them definitely is the age of criminal responsibility, which is proposed in the new bill to rise from 8 to 12, and really protect children who are underage. And not expose them to very harsh conditions through the legal system. Mm-hmm. And also the hearing of and determining of cases that involve children in conflict of the law with the law is really capped to 6 months. That tells you already, if that happens, children will not be in the long-standing cases, case management through the judicial system. Mm-hmm. Any child in conflict with the law will also get legal representation. That tells us then, if that happens, any child who is in conflict with the law will be represented well. Last but not least, on the same, we are also glad that the National Prevention and the National Council for Children Services and the Department of Children Services, it's now very clear how they are going to operate. Having very clear guidelines on what guides the NCCS and what guides the DCS. Okay. So definitely, with the clarity of roles, we expect that children's services will be more efficient. Thank you. And
let me just challenge Lillian on this point, because Harriet has raised really valid points, especially on the aspect of a child-friendly justice system in Kenya. And if you look at international law, if you look at the law, these things are provided for. But when, as I mentioned, the challenge is actualizing them on the ground, making sure that, as she says, the issues of age, the age of that a child can be prosecuted for criminal action, the issues of having free legal representation, are they actually actualized on the ground?
Thank you so much. They are not actualized to the extent that we would desire. Mm-hmm. As I said earlier on, the government of Kenya has really made some good strides, but we still have glaring gaps, like the age that you're talking about, the legal representation of children, to make sure that we bridge that gap that still exists. If you see cases of defilement, for instance, of children in some communities, there are also challenges that we are seeing where more legal representation could be found wanting in terms of the gaps that we've identified. You find that children sometimes don't have any recourse, because at community level, people may be protecting each other, especially when defilement is done by a family member. So there are community challenges that exist, but I do acknowledge that even at government level, there's more that can be done to make sure that legal representation of children, mm-hmm. and making sure that child-friendly courts are made available across the country for children to be able to be heard and to be able to receive justice as they deserve. So okay. The gaps do exist, but efforts are underway to bridge those gaps.
All right. And maybe for you, Lois, because most of the things that they're speaking is from a larger perspective, but you deal with these things at the community level, and that I think is in Kasarani. What's your experience dealing with these issues of child protection?
Thank you. I would say a major challenge comes in, especially brought about by this COVID issue, mm-hmm. where we now have teen pregnant girls. Sometimes we are at a loss where to place them in places of safety. Sometimes we fail to have enough to where we can be able to keep them as they await delivery. Mm-hmm. Sometimes these pregnancies are as a result of familial relations, probably incest, mm-hmm. A close relative. Therefore, you get to a point where the child cannot be accepted to continue living in that family. So sometimes we have that challenge of where to place these children. There are many, and the facilities we have are actually overwhelmed. We also have issues of defilement, like my colleague has said. And because of this COVID, I have seen cases that are dragging for long, mm-hmm. because when they're supposed to go to court, the courts are closed. There was mm-hmm. a case, so it has been deferred, and such has been dragging the cases. We also have issues of neglect that has really escalated. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I would call it really neglect, because sometimes the parents have, they don't have a means of supporting the children. So we would say they are neglecting, but in essence, they have nothing. They have lost their livelihoods. They do not have, they have no means of supporting the family.
Would you say then that COVID-19 is rolling back the progress that had been made and sort of taking us some few steps behind?
I would say so, because of the increase in the cases of neglect, cases of defilement, cases of physical abuse, because there's a lot that is going on within the family that has led to, I would say, domestic violence within the family that also affects the children. And to that point, we are actually like stepping back, and we have to take back and try to bring these families together, try to find a way of assisting the family. We know there's the cash transfer that has been rolling for some time, but we would not say that is enough to take care of the families. There are a lot of vulnerabilities in the community that we still need to look at to ensure that the child does not become a victim in between all this that is happening. Yeah.
Lillian, let me just get your comment on that bit about COVID-19.
Thank you very much. I agree that COVID-19 has really set us back a long way, especially in terms of the gains that have been made in development in general, especially in the area of the health sector, and then also in livelihoods. But specifically referring to children, as my colleague has outlined, we've seen a huge increase in child violence at family level, at community level. As children, for a long time, you recall when COVID came into Kenya, children were out of school for longer than 6 months. So the cases of early marriage increased, the cases of female genital mutilation increased, the cases of child pregnancy with a lot of girl children out of school. We've also seen thousands of children that have been impregnated. And even as schools reopened, we've seen that a lot of children have been excluded from school because they are preparing to have babies and then hopefully be reintegrated back into school. So COVID-19 has really rolled back a lot of gains that we had made by increasing the vulnerabilities, especially of girl children in the community. A lot of programs are underway to try and address that. So I'm sure you heard also the head of state encouraging schools to make sure that those children are brought back to school. We are also working with some of these community-based structures to also do some tracing to understand where these children are and how they can be supported, because you have a case now of children becoming mothers. So that too perpetrates the whole vulnerability cycle, because if you have a child that doesn't have livelihoods, but they are becoming a mother, they also have to take care of a child. That really just perpetrates that vulnerability cycle. So we are working in partnership with government, with local structures on the ground, like the area advisory councils, the county commissioners, to make sure that those children are identified and supported.
Okay, let me take you back to the issue of budgetary allocations. And earlier on, you mentioned the issue of education and health being perhaps the biggest beneficiaries. Do you think there are other areas of concern that perhaps are not getting adequate support from the government, especially on issues of budgetary allocations?
Yes, definitely. There could always be improvement in the area of protection of children. For instance, we are talking child protection, and we have structures that exist at community level and government level. But very often you find that adequate resources are not allocated to be able to strengthen those structures. We also have, we also have the Children's Bill that we are grateful has been already passed to the executive level. I think it's now going to Parliament, the Children's Bill 2020. It was transmitted to the National Assembly by the executive, and this is after having been delayed for over 5 years. So the process of consideration, debate, and approval of that bill by the National Assembly needs to be accelerated, and that bill also needs to be resourced so that children are seriously considered where planning and budgeting for them is concerned. So there are definitely areas for improvement in the areas such as access to water, sanitation, hygiene, also livelihoods. You know, we have quite a number of young people that are in the informal sector. So what can we do to give them those life skills that they require so that they can have sources of livelihoods if they are not able to be in the formal sector training. So definitely there are areas that we can plan and budget better for in the country. But as I said, there are great efforts that are ongoing.
Okay. Let me just bring back Harriet. Harriet, if you step outside this building right now into the streets, you will find some children we like to refer to as street children. And every time you refer to them that way, it sort of kind of removes the rights that perhaps they should, the rights that they should, of course, be provided for by any government, by stakeholders, by institutions as children. Something we forget is they might be street children, but also they are children.
Yeah, definitely they are children, and it really begs the question of why are they even in the streets in the first place? Because besides just really demanding maybe the government does whatever it does, which we are doing right now, even in the learning and reflections we are having, we are also asking ourselves, where did we go wrong as a society that we have street families and street children? And it calls for a lot of engagement as stakeholders to really see how children finally end up in the streets, what are communities doing, and how are they being supported to become a safety net for children. Because by the time a child is ending up in the street, because as they grow in the street, trust me, that's where now families begin to emerge. So we really have to go back to the drawing board and see how best to make communities more secure and provide a safety net where children grow, are protected, and become citizens that have dignity and fulfilling in their lives. So yes, there's some work the government also needs to do in ensuring that those children are provided for, where restoration can happen, like placement in the institutions that exist. That really needs to be facilitated and supported. Where they just need to be referred for even training support through like the life skills training you're talking about, TVET support you're talking about. Let them get those opportunities just equally like any other child in a community setting. Yeah, okay. So that's what we're advancing also in this discussion, that children should be treated as children wherever they are, at the community level or in the vulnerable, hard situations they are in the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
And maybe for you, Lois, then you deal, I like to repeat that you interact with these children every day. There have been programs in the past, even in the counties, to try and sort of provide shelters for these street children. And the challenge sometimes is you get authorities tell you that once we move them into a safe house, to a children's home, the next day you come back and they are once again in the streets. What's behind this increasing number of children in our streets, at least from where you sit?
Thank you. I would say, like my colleague has said, it starts with the families, or where we are trying to take these children back to. Because if we have not dealt with the reason why they left their families in the first place, even if we returned them there and the push factors are still there, they will still be pushed back to the streets. So we are saying child protection is everybody's business. We have to apply the multi-sectoral approach so that we have several partners and stakeholders working to really find out why they are in the streets in the first place. So that if we deal with the family, the push factors that led them to the streets, then once we bring them back to the families or to the institutions for rehabilitation, then it will work. But until we are able, for example, to deal with the poverty or the violence in the families.
We are a bit reactionary because we wait for them once they are already in the streets instead of maybe dealing with these issues at the family level. What is pushing the children to the streets?
I would say that, yes, sometimes we are, but we are also looking at some institutions and organizations, like I'm saying, that are have a better approach that they would want. We have a few people who are doing a large thing in their own little ways.
Yeah.
We have institutions that are looking at these children. Why are you in the street in the first place? They try to talk to them. They voluntarily, they ask them to come for rehabilitation voluntarily. After that, they're able to follow up back to their families. They want to find out why did they leave, what was the issue, Was it an issue familial? Was it violence? Was it an issue of maybe just truancy? And once they deal with that, the children are able to go back. So it would not help if we just pick them all from the street today and put them somewhere else. If we have not dealt with the root cause, they would still be back on the streets tomorrow. And that is back to, we are saying, the DCS, this is not something you can do it alone. We need to have a multi-sectoral approach. And everybody's business, like we are saying, is child protection is everybody's business.
Okay, and maybe back to you, Harriet. Then, if what I'm picking from her comments is that this is a responsibility that sometimes you leave it to one agency, you leave it to the Directorate of Children's Services or the police, and you will never fully address it. So that calls for me, at least from where I sit, some bit of a collaboration. Talk to us about the importance of having so many partners on board, including Plan International and World Vision, partnering with the government and working towards a common goal of ensuring that children's rights are protected.
Yeah, as well said, actually we cannot do this alone. Whichever organization, even with the resources different organizations have, I think most important is to really see our meeting point, you know, the synergies we bring together. Of course, working with the government, which is the primary duty carer, to ensure that we understand what problem we're addressing together. Because what happens sometimes on the ground, you'll find a lot of activities are actually happening, but in a disjointed manner. So that calls upon us as stakeholders and the government to really see how best to coordinate our services. It calls for us to understand, you know, who is doing what wherever they are doing. So that then at the end of the day, all the effort brought together, we are able to address these problems. So the isolated kind of working and the approaches really just need to be something that we need to check continuously as stakeholders, so that we pull resources together. We have some very harmonized way of approaching these problems, and of course sharing and learning from each other to see how better we can deliver the services for children. Yeah.
And maybe looking at that that keychain, the way it looks, where do you fit exactly at Plan International in the jigsaw?
Yeah, we actually, Plan International is a grassroots organization. We are on the ground. We are on the ground working with the structures that exist, and really mobilize communities to the cause of action, creating a lot of awareness on the ground on child protection issues, because Victor, you'll be surprised, child protection sometimes is a foreign discussion in the communities we work in. So just bringing them to speed to understand that child protection is an issue for all of us. It's not about really thinking that somebody else will come and protect your child. So as we earlier said, the family at family level, what are they doing together as a family to ensure their children are protected? Now, at school level, what is happening in a school community, you know, beyond just the school environment? What is happening in the school community that actually speaks to child protection? So that you'll find even parents are concerned that maybe the school is not acting in a certain way that really advances the rights of children, or some rights are abused and the school community actually engages. So we really try as much as possible through the structures that exist to ensure that one, people understand what child protection is all about, and even understand how to identify, you know, the symptoms that give you an indicator that children are being abused in one way or another. So it just calls for us to be alive to the fact that child abuse is very rampant, and therefore, what are we doing as stakeholders to ensure that children are protected? And of course, committing resources to facilitate this.
Okay, and Lillian, sometimes the challenge with working without a target is the pace at which work moves. But in this case, we have the Sustainable Development Goals. These are things that should be achieved at least in the next 9 years, being in 2021 now. What do we need to do differently to ensure that indeed we meet these timelines?
I think one of the key important things that we need to do is to collect data. As you know, the Republic of Kenya has never developed, never published, and never publicized a comprehensive, integrated national report on the status of children's rights. So for me, I think starting at that state is very important for us to have that integrated report, because that will show us how well we've done. Right now, the progress that has been made is a bit scattered in the different departments, in the different sectors. But we need a comprehensive report that shows us how far have we come and how much do we still have to go? And I believe that working with organizations like Joining Forces Alliance for Kenya, where World Vision Plan, Save the Children, TEDESOM, SOS Children's Village, as well as the Child Fund are represented, can really go a long way. If we partner with government to be able to develop such a report, I think it will help us to really understand the real status of children's rights in Kenya. And that way we'll be able to see what remains to be done and a plan of action developed to make sure that we are able to meet that gap in the 9 years that are remaining. So it's important to understand where we are right now by having that integrated national report on the status of children's rights in Kenya.
And maybe because a significant chunk of our population actually is in children, and children make up a very huge chunk of Kenya's population today. Can we afford to be in the situation that we are today, considering that this is indeed the future of this country?
We definitely we cannot afford to be in this situation, because as you say, children are the future. So if we are not going to plan for them adequately and make sure that they are protected, they are cared for, that they are even given a chance and a voice to be able to be at the table to make decisions. Because one of the challenges that we have is that the majority of children in Kenya, they are not even aware of the platforms for participation and how to be involved in decision-making processes. So all these things have to be improved. We have a lot of children that are members of child rights clubs, that are members of the Kenya Children's Assembly, that are members of students' councils, and their participation is largely limited to their communities or schools, but they have not been given a meaningful engagement with policymakers, both administrative and political leaders. So their views are really considered in public policy decision-making processes. So it's important that that be corrected, because we are talking about their future. We cannot afford to do so without giving them a voice, because they also know what their desires, their wants, and their needs are. So my proposal is that there's need to develop and implement a national child participation plan that should be anchored on the national child participation guidelines to make sure that children come to the table, they are able to influence their own future, and that they participate and they are heard.
Okay. And just, I would want to, of course, hear what Lois has to say about that. But I have a caller, that should be Amos from Pipeline. Good morning, Amos. Do you have a comment or a question to our panelists this morning?
Okay, I'm Amos Getty.
Yes, Amos.
Yeah, I was just following the discussion.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, pertaining the rights of children.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'm happy that children are being focused as far as their issues are concerned.
Okay.
Yeah, my main concern is because we have this organization in place.
Mm-hmm.
I think before we focus the issue that comes tomorrow, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
We should focus on the issues of rape cases.
Mm-hmm.
And of late, we have seen abduction issues pertaining the children, especially at Kitengela.
Mm-hmm.
And the other one was around Sijui Umoja.
Mm-hmm.
That has become vital issues as far as our children are concerned.
Thank you.
Then
Thank you.
The other is drug abuse as far as children is concerned.
Okay.
Yeah, children are being used to traffic drugs high school. I saw in K24 when a boy was used to transport drugs to Mombasa from Western to Mombasa, where he is schooling.
Mm-hmm.
So that issue also should be addressed thoroughly.
Okay, thank you, Amos.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for calling. And I think he raises very valid points, Lois, especially with the issue of abduction, of rape cases. I'm sure you are following the very tragic story from Kitengela, the child who was abducted and later was found dead. Maybe let me just get your reaction as someone who is on the ground.
Thank you. It is a sad case. it's saddening, to say the least. But these cases actually are on the rise. And like our colleagues have said, and we keep saying, it is very important to be able to sensitize these children to know how they need to behave, with strangers, with family. And we know that the people who abduct children, in most cases, are not strangers. Or it happens with people that they are familiar with. Yes, so that they are able to respond to them without any doubt. So it also calls, like we are saying, how are we in the family level taking care of our children? Are we absent parents? Are we absent guardians? Do we listen to our children when they have issues to talk about? Are we there? You know, sometimes we are talking of this, the digital world where we have reached, and we are all on our phones, we are all working at home. Are we taking time to listen to our children? Are we taking time to just understand what they are going through? Are we taking time to listen what happened in school when they come home? Because they speak. Sometimes the children speak and the guardians or the parents do not. You don't have time to listen. So it is also good for the parents to listen. But we are alive to what is happening, and we know that with partnership with the security, excuse me, with partnership with the police, the DCI, and all the multi-sectoral approach agencies, we are working towards protecting our children.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Harriet, the other thing that he raised it was raised by Amos in that call was not just the issue of drugs and children being used to traffic drugs, but it also reminds me that there is also a whole issue about children themselves actually being trafficked.
Yeah, the child trafficking by day remains one of the big issue that the government really has to deal with. By the time a child is seen alone, you know, a child is seen alone traveling in either a public vehicle or whatever means that is being used, and nobody is really questioning, then we have a problem. We have a systematic problem. I really wish that the society is more alive to the fact that children are no longer safe. Children are no longer safe, especially girls. You know, there is a naivety that happens where children just walk around and nobody is really questioning them where they are going and where they are coming from. And then the issue of using children to even transport whatever they are transporting. And I really like what Madam Lois, who is talking about, you know, where are parents when all this is happening, where are guardians when all this is happening. So that then we really strengthen the point of the first line protection of a child, which is at the family level. Children need to be talked to about these things. From whatever age, you know, we are in a world where I think children are more exposed and more vulnerable, and they even know more things than their parents or guardians. So a discussion is necessary. A discussion is necessary. Don't think that your child is naive. Don't think your child is, has no idea. Trust me, this child has so much they are holding that calls for just an opportunity to discuss and really know what is happening in their lives. So I think, Victor, there is much more we need to do. While we expect that, of course, our security agents and the security structures will just ensure that children are protected. Talk of nyumba kumi, like in the community. When a child disappears, where do they disappear to? Within the village, you know? And is it being raised and discussed at that local level as an issue of concern? So that then subsequently all the other levels become of interest. Okay. So this discussion is very valid, as Amos has said, and it's something that really needs to be checked.
All right. And maybe as we start to wrap up this conversation, then it means that what I'm picking up from this conversation is we have made some significant progress. But there are areas, there are still gaps that need to be addressed, and most likely, most importantly, some of them need to be addressed urgently. So what do we need to do differently? Let me start with you, Lillian.
Thank you so much. For me, I think child protection begins at the household and family level, and I think my colleague Lois has alluded to that. So as part of our ongoing efforts in strengthening child protection systems, for me, there's need to prioritize a household capacity strengthening to enhance child protection. So we need to focus a lot more, increase focus a lot more on strengthening the role of parents and caregivers, the guardians on child protection. You know, we have a lot of cultural issues that are at play when child violence comes into play. So we need to also influence those mindsets and behaviors by sensitizing, by educating people, so that we can inculcate that culture of positive parenting approaches in communities. Sometimes people get involved in early marriage, for instance, for economic reasons. So how do we give families alternative sources of livelihood, strengthening their economic base, so that they do not see early marriage as an economic opportunity, and allow children to have that opportunity to go to school, grow into adulthood, and make their own decisions in terms of how they transition. And then also, we need to also look at how we can strengthen some of these community-based structures that exist for child protection. We've got the area advisory councils, we've got community policing forums. How do we strengthen those structures so that they are able to, they have resources to be able to carry out their work whenever there are issues of child violence? So for me, these are some out of many efforts that still need to be made to strengthen our child protection systems in the country.
Okay, allow me to take just one more call. Good morning. If you're hearing me, good morning. Wairimu, do you have a comment or a question this morning?
Yes, I do.
Yes, Wairimu. Wairimu, please lower the volume of your TV so that we can hear you well.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, my name is Wairimu Mungai from Thika, and thank you for the discussions you're having right now. And I guess I would request that we have this kind of a discussion more time, and even allowing greater participants or possibly actors into it. My contribution is that I'd really want to appreciate the work that the participants are playing in the role of child protection. My contribution, however, is talking to the grassroots, because I work a lot with the grassroots in Kiambu on child protection. And what we are experiencing right now is that as we realize it's everything that goes wrong that has the greatest impact on children, and it has a long-term impact. We have good policies, yes, but the fact that these policies are not implemented and there is no budget to show any significant commitment to implement child protection, I think what I am requesting is this. When at our county levels, every county must actually commit what their child protection agenda is. Children are citizens, and they need to be highly protected. Every budget, every county should actually come up with their county protection agenda that is well linked to the already existing policies. And I really pray that we could take the children of Kenya like citizens. And the other thing at this point in time, very briefly, is to say we are heading to elections, and we have gone through a very bad pandemic. These major issues have gotten so bad. If you come to the county, to the grassroots, it's extremely overwhelming, and there is no funds whatsoever, even for the many volunteers. Many Wanjikos are the ones who are carrying the burden, not big organizations. It is the ordinary woman and man at the grassroots level that are actually overwhelmed with the burden of child protection, which is caused by the negative impact by the duty bearers.
Okay.
Thank you for your...
Thank you very much, Wairimu from Thika, and she raises very valid points. I think the first one, Lois, is the issue of if we rely on the national government for funding, for it to trickle down to each county in northeastern and western Kenya, it could take too long. Counties have to take the charge themselves. Do you have something to say?
Yes, thank you. I would say that trickles back to what we were saying, that it's a multi-sectoral approach in terms of child protection, that is, because we have to work with what we have. be it the county government, be it the partners, the non-government partners within the county and within sub-counties. That is where it begins. We work together and see what we are able to do in our own little levels at the sub-counties and counties as we wait for the national budget. Of course, we are always praying and we are always hoping that there can be more budgeting into matters of children, so that we are able to work with confidence and that we are catered for in terms of dealing with children. We are also looking at data. We are saying that issues of children have to be informed by data, and that is what is happening currently. We have the Child Protection Information Management System, where we have data concerning issues of children countrywide. Yes, okay. Yeah, we have data of children, of issues relating to children, and this should be able to inform budgeting, so that we are looking at this is what has happened, what is the data saying, data does not lie, so that should be able to inform budgeting and we are able to budget for our children. We are also looking at if we are trying to protect children, we might strengthen the community structures and everything, but we also need to make the children aware of their rights. So we are looking at schools, we are looking at churches and other forums where we can engage children and let them know that this is my right, this is what is expected of me, this is what child protection entails, so that they are also able to protect themselves even as we protect them.
All right. What a great discussion we're having, but we have to wrap it up. Ladies, I'll take your closing remarks. I'll give each one of you 40 seconds on what the way forward should be. Let me start with you, Harriet. Harriet, please unmute.
Yeah, there's more to be done, and just the last caller has said about government committing resources to implement whatever is in the policies is actually the way to go. There must be that commitment. You know, we can't just have policies in place and the accompanying resources are not provided for. So it's just a plea to the government that we want to see accelerated impact by resource allocation to the different aspects that affect children, especially girls in Kenya.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lillian, tomorrow is the International Day for the African Child. What is your parting shot for this conversation?
My parting shot is to encourage the government of Kenya. I talked earlier on about the children's bill that is still to be debated. So I'm just encouraging that should be accelerated, because it's one document that's going to go a long way in showing that the government is serious about children's rights in Kenya. And once it is passed, and that's our prayer that it is passed in Parliament, its enactment and subsequent implementation is going to accelerate the implementation of the rights of all children in Kenya. So as we celebrate tomorrow, that is my call to government to ensure that they accelerate the debate of the Children's Bill 2020 and ensure its enactment and its implementation, so that we show our seriousness in respecting children's rights in Kenya.
Thank you very much, Lillian. And let me just get your closing remarks for this conversation, Lois.
Thank you. My closing remarks would be, as we celebrate Day of African Child tomorrow, and we are talking about making Africa and Kenya fit for children, let us consider looking at issues of violence against children, like the survey was done and we are disseminating. We are saying that when you spot violence, then you stop it. You make Africa and Kenya fit for children.
All right. Thank you very much. And I think that wraps up this conversation. We have been talking about the children of Kenya, the children of Africa, and how we can progress and accelerate progress towards the full realization of their rights, as, of course, provided for in the Constitution and in international law. Many thanks to my guests this morning, Lillian Anzigale. She's a Sub-County Children's Officer, the Department of Children's Services, Kasarani Sub-County, as well as Lillian Dodzo. She's the National Director for World Vision Kenya, as well as the Director of Program and Implementation and Quality at Plan International, that is Harriet Osimbo. We have to take a quick break, but when we come back, we talk about something else that matters most to you, which is issues about money. How do you negotiate? How do you negotiate a business deal for a salary increment? Do you know your worth, and are you actually being compensated as per the value that you bring? We have to take a quick break, but we'll be back before you know it.